Hello, I'm Katie and I am back on the Vitabiotics and TalkMum channel for my second video today, and I'm really excited because it's a subject that I think all mums absolutely love to talk about, and that is my birth stories. So I have two little girls and they both ended up being born by C-section, and this wasn't something that I had planned at all. I always kind of had it in my head I would have a natural birth. A C-section didn't enter my mind whatsoever, but it turns out, for reasons which I'll explain in a minute, that a C-section kind of became part of our lives. And looking back now, I wouldn't change a single second of it. I would have a C-section 100 times over again, because at the end of the day, for me, they both were positive birth experiences and my two little girls arrived safely, and that was all that mattered. So with my first one, this is actually a reason I ended up having a C-section in the first place. She was breech, and from every midwife appointment from about 20 weeks onwards, they kept saying, oh, she's breech, which basically, if you don't know, just means that she was head up rather than head down. And they kept saying, oh, she'll turn, you know, 97% of them turn by the end of pregnancy, so you have absolutely nothing to worry about. But it kind of got nearer and nearer to my due date. She still hadn't turned, and I could feel her at night trying to go head down, and she just was stuck. She was completely wedged. She'd run out of room. She was quite a big baby, and yeah, she was stuck. So I ended up actually, probably for the last kind of maybe 8 weeks of my pregnancy, I ended up being on twice weekly monitoring at the hospital, just because she didn't move all that much. And eventually it was decided that the safest mode of delivery for her would be a C-section. So it was very, very surreal knowing the date that she would arrive. We still decided not to kind of tell people, bar close family, when she would arrive, because it kind of felt like, oh, you know, you're not going to know every single thing, and it kind of felt a lot of pressure, people knowing that she would arrive on that day. So we didn't say anything, bar to close family. But she was actually scheduled to be born on Christmas Eve 2010, which is a crazy day for a birthday, not the best day for a birthday, so apologies for that, Mads. But the night before, we had a kind of Christmas dinner with my family, because I knew that I wouldn't be around for Christmas that year. And yeah, it was very, very surreal knowing that she would be arriving when she did. And so on Christmas Eve morning, we woke up really, really early. I was incredibly nervous. It was also very surreal because I didn't really have, obviously, any signs of labour. My body has never gone into labour, although I was with her having Braxton Hicks, so I don't know whether labour would have eventually been imminent or whether I'd have just carried on having them for a couple of weeks, because she was actually born at, oh gosh, I think it was just over, but I think it was about 38.5 weeks she was born. And isn't it awful that you can never remember? I always remembered them exactly, and as the time goes on I kind of forget. But yeah, I think she was about 38 and a bit weeks when she was born. So we arrived at hospital really, really early. It was very, very surreal knowing we were going in to have a baby, with obviously out having any sort of signs of labour at all. And we had been told at our pre-op appointment that potentially we could be waiting if there were emergency C-sections taking place or any other emergencies. But it turns out it was very, very quiet on Christmas Eve. So almost as soon as we got in there, we were basically ushered down to theatre. So I changed into a gown, my husband changed into doctor's kind of looking scrubs, which he was quite excited about. And we went down to theatre. He wasn't allowed in while I had my epidural, so he had to kind of just wait outside for that bit. But because it was an elective C-section, in their eyes it was classed as an elective C-section, he was allowed in for the rest of it. So we went in. I was really, really nervous about the epidural beforehand, because obviously you don't like the idea of something going into your spine, but actually having the injection to kind of get everything numb hurt more than the actual epidural. So then I was told to lay down. They put a big blue screen up, and we heard a noise, and we kind of were like, oh, what's that noise? And for a weird second we thought that they were shaving me or something bizarre, but actually it turned out that they were suctioning my waters. And literally a couple of minutes later she was born, and she let out a big cry. It was a really, really nice atmosphere in there. There was probably about 12 people, which I was quite shocked about. I didn't expect there to be that many people, but as it was Christmas, they were playing Christmas songs, and it was just generally a really nice atmosphere. Yeah, she was born, and we got to have a little look at her. My husband got to hold her first, which some people have said, you know, did that make you sad? But actually, even, you know, it was an amazing experience to have him holding her first. And she went off to be weighed and checked, and he went with her, and then they set about sort of sewing me back up, and that actually took a lot longer than I thought it was going to do. It took about 40 minutes in total to sew me back up, which I was quite shocked about, but it was a really nice atmosphere. There was never any cause for concern. It was very straightforward. We got to hold her, have pictures taken, and then eventually I was popped onto a trolley, which was quite weird because they lifted you up with a big sheet. That was quite strange. Put into a trolley and then wheeled back to recovery, and actually the recovery was okay. It hurt more than I expected it to, but then I don't know, you know, it is a major form of surgery, having your tummy muscles all sort of cut into, but it was okay. You know, I was up within a few days. I was shocked at first about how long it took me to sort of change a nappy, and sort of I had to really sort of ring the bell and ask for help to kind of get her out of her cot because it was really painful. But other than that, it was a really positive experience. I recovered from it really well, and all that mattered was that she arrived safe and sound, and she did. So then it came to my second little girl, and she was born in February 2013, and throughout my pregnancy with her, I knew I obviously had the choice as to whether to have a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after C-section, or whether to have another elective C-section. And I ummed and ahed throughout the whole thing. I read so many different stories on the internet, whether they were horror stories, good stories, successful stories, and at the back of my mind, I kind of knew I always deep down wanted a C-section. I don't know why that was. You know, originally I would have loved to have had a natural birth, but because my eldest daughter arrived by C-section, I kind of think I felt safe. I knew the process and things like that, and so deep down I think I knew I wanted a C-section, but I was scared about the opposition I would come across, because obviously a C-section is far more expensive for the NHS. A C-section does have more risks, and it is surgery, and I was worried. I'd read stories that people had come up against opposition from midwives and consultants about it, but in my case it couldn't have been any better, and they were really supportive. So I was booked in for another C-section on the 11th of February, and again, it was very similar. We dropped my eldest off at her grandma's on that morning, and I cried my eyes out because I think I was so nervous and also aware of all the changes that were going to happen in our family. And we headed off to the hospital again. This time though, there was another couple, and we did already know that they were going to be there that day as well. And so they basically said, because we were both kind of routine C-sections, it was just luck of the draw as to who would have, you know, get there first. And unfortunately they got there literally about a minute before us, and we were kicking ourselves thinking, damn it. So they actually ended up being scheduled first. So we were both kind of in a room together with a curtain separating us. And they obviously got ready and went down to theatre, and it was it felt like a long time, but it was a good couple of hours that they were down there. I don't know whether they had complications or what it was, but it did take a lot longer. Eventually they kind of got wheeled back up with their baby, and we could hear them behind the curtain discussing their C-section in graphic detail, which didn't help our nerves at all. But soon it was our turn, and we got whisked down to theatre. We walked again. My husband was there had to stay outside for the epidural, but was there for the rest of it. The experience definitely wasn't as calm and nice the second time round. I don't know why that was. I had a bit of an issue where they could just not keep a cannula in my arm. I have very funny veins, and they kept putting it, the anaesthetist was sort of fussing around while they were sort of getting on with stuff, and he kept taking it out and taking it in and putting it back in and then switching arms, and my hands were looking like a pin cushion. And I heard him at one point say, "Oh, her vein is tissuing," and basically I looked down and my whole hand had swollen up and something had gone completely wrong there. So that wasn't quite as positive an experience. It did kind of make me very unnerved. I ended up actually being sick. I think it was kind of a combination of nerves, and also because I'm not very good with anything to do with veins, it just makes me feel a little bit sick. So yeah, I ended up being sick in that, and it was probably not very pleasant for my poor husband because he had to hold the bowl while I because I was lying down, obviously being sick into it. But she was born. Again, when she was born, it wasn't quite as easy a process because I don't know what was wrong with her, but she was stuck, and all of a sudden we heard them shout forceps, forceps, and I had no idea that they used forceps with C-sections, so that was a little bit kind of unnerving. But she was born, she let out a big cry, she was absolutely perfect, and it took a little bit longer the second time around because apparently there's more scar tissue to sort of cut into. But she was born, my husband held her again, it was wonderful. I got to hold her again. It took a lot longer, so I think we were probably there about an hour in total while they sewed me up, because again they have to go through scar tissue. So yeah, it wasn't overall quite as calming and quite as nice, but at no point was there a panic or anything like that, bar my hand and the anaesthetist. There was never any panic with the baby, but yeah, it definitely wasn't quite so peaceful and calming as the first one. I did actually end up losing a lot of blood the second time round, so I lost 1.5 litres of blood, and I was just very, very narrowly off having a blood transfusion. But once it had all happened, everything was good, she was safe, and you soon forget about that. And the second time around, my recovery was a lot better as well. I think it's because I knew what to expect, so I was ready for it. I also, even though I didn't sleep a wink, I did stay in hospital for 2 nights this time around, whereas the last time I only stayed for a night because I discharged myself early. And I kind of relished the help from the midwives, and they were brilliant. Both times I couldn't fault the midwives and the staff at the hospital. So yeah, that was it. That's my birth stories. You know, I love listening and looking back on them. I love thinking about them. You know, I really wish that I could replay it. I'm sure every single mum does. That'd be the one thing that I wish I could replay again and again and again, and just go back to that day. And the feeling of them being born is just the most amazing thing in the world. And, you know, all the whether you had a bad pregnancy or a bad birth or anything like that, it just, as soon as you get them in your arms, that is just the main thing. And it was just the most amazing feeling in the world. And yeah, I wish I could go back and replay them again and again and again. So overall, you know, a C-section wasn't part of my plan, especially not the first time round, but they arrived safely, and that was all that mattered. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed listening to my birth stories. I absolutely love hearing other people's birth stories. I think as a mum, you never tire of hearing about other people, and it's really, really interesting as well, because I've never gone through natural labour, to hear about all these amazing women doing these incredibly long labours, and yeah, they're all absolute superstars. So yeah, thanks for having me on the TalkMum channel again, and look forward to seeing you for my next video. Bye!